everyone, welcome back to the Stitches and Scribbles channel. My name is Erin, and today I'm going to be talking to you all about the books that I read during the month of March in 2025, as well as some books that I acquired on our spring break trip. So for those of you who don't know, when I'm not doing YouTube stuff, I'm actually a school librarian, so I do still get a spring break in order to go on a vacation because all the kids will be gone. So we did decide to take advantage of that this year, and we made a trip to Door County, Wisconsin. If you don't know what that is, it's a peninsula that goes onto Lake Michigan from Wisconsin, and it's known for being a very picturesque kind of touristy location. Picture Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls, but like the Midwest version is very much how I found it. Lots of little beaches, fun boutiques to go into, great restaurants, and because we went in the off season, it was pretty quiet, like not a lot of crowds or anything, so we really got to just enjoy the scenery even though it was very cold outside. But one of the things that we wanted to do while we were on vacation was to spend a lot of time reading. So I think I had a total of 13 books that I read during the month of March, and several of them were on that spring break trip, so I'm really excited to share all of those with you. Of course, while I was up there, I also went to a couple of local bookstores, so I have some purchases to show you as well. But let's start with what I finished during the month of March. The first book on my list was this one. This is An Exorcist Tells His Story by Father Gabriel Amorth. Gabriel Amorth is was, I don't know if he is actually still in this position. This book was published quite a while ago, although I don't remember exactly when, so I'm going to look at it on my app. It's missing the publication information on the app. 1990 was when it was originally published in Italian, so it's fairly old at this point. But he was one of the exorcists for Rome and wrote about his experiences in dealing with things that an exorcist would deal with. So this is a very dark book and heavy on theology. This is one of my adoration books that I read for the month. Adoration, if you're not Catholic, is when you go and sit in the presence of the blessed host, which Catholics believe is transformed into the true body of Christ. And I find that the best way for me to sit in that quiet space is by reading. So that's when I do a lot of my theology reading, is during adoration, and this was my pick for the month for that. I have read this before. I read it sometime when I was in high school, but decided to pick it back up again after reading the Exorcist Files book by Father Carlos Martin, who is also an exorcist and uses his stories for the Exorcist Files podcast. So highly recommend that book as well, but this is kind of the precursor to that, if you will. So Father Gabriel Amorth has 3 books that follow his stories, and he inserts a lot of theological information as well as you read. So highly recommend if you're interested in pursuing that topic. The next book I read was an audiobook, and this was the second book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series by Marie Brennan. It was The Tropic of Serpents. I read this through my local library using the Libby app. I'll go ahead and read the description. Actually, no, I'm not going to, because if you haven't read the first one, this description contains spoilers. But if you remember me talking about reading the first book, the Memoirs of Lady Trent series is about a dragon naturalist who travels the world to study dragons. And even though it takes place in a fictional world, it very much mimics kind of Victorian England era. The first one to me gave very Scandinavian vibes in the places that she was traveling to. I believe this one was supposed to be inspired by Africa, but it was very, very good, very well written. It feels halfway between reading a textbook and reading like a historical fiction novel, because the details about the dragons and the information she's collecting is so specific that it kind of gives that very real world building feel. So I love this book series. I am still continuing to read it. I actually also finished the third one during this month, so I'll talk about that in a minute. The next book I read was a children's book by Kevin Henkes, and Kevin Henkes is probably most famous for writing Lily's Purple Plastic Purse, which is a picture book, as well as all those other little mouse characters. I personally had Chrysanthemum as a kid and loved that story. But he also writes some middle grade fiction, and I believe possibly more beyond that. I haven't really looked. But the next book I read was Junonia by Kevin Henkes. And this one I will read the description because there's no spoilers for other parts of the series. Returning to the beach cottage, a cottage named Scallop, where she has always celebrated her birthday, is a special occasion for Alice Rice. Who will see the first dolphin this time, the first pelican? What will have changed, stayed the same, and will this be the year she finally finds a Junonia shell? Alice's friends are all returning too, and she's certain her parents have the best party planned for her. Alice can't wait. If Alice is lucky, everything will be absolutely perfect. Will Alice be lucky? So I think that synopsis doesn't really give you the whole picture of what happens in this story. A lot of the book is Alice realizing how much her friends and family members have changed. So this beach house that they go to, there are other regulars who have beach houses nearby, and she's kind of learning how to deal with other people's lives changing. So even though it seems like a very simplistic storyline, it was a really deep, emotional, general fiction book. I would recommend this to readers who want that kind of emotional feeling of a book. It also kind of felt like reading a journal, even though I don't think it was told in first person. It might have been. But I really recommended it. I also loved all the details of the shells that Alice collects, and I just thought it was a very sweet story. The next book I read as an ebook, and I also got this through the Libby app at my library, and it's taking a second to load on my screen. But it was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I read Babel a couple months ago by the same author and really enjoyed it, so I wanted to try this one. Unfortunately, I was not as big of a fan of The Poppy War as I was of Babel, so I won't be continuing to read the series. It's a very imaginative fantasy world. It felt at the beginning of the story, it kind of felt almost a little bit like Avatar: The Last Airbender in the way that the world building was set up. But the thing that I ended up not loving in this book series was two things. One, it is very graphic and very violent, and I'm not always crazy about that. And I kind of had the same issue with Babel as well. There are some really dark moments in it, and this heightened that. And I also wasn't nuts about how much of the magic and the world building was built around drug use. I think it worked for the universe, and I can definitely see why the author chose that path for how her magic system worked, but it just wasn't my personal favorite. So I won't be continuing with the series, but if you like really inventive fantasy world building and you don't mind those two concepts being a part of it, I think you might like this book. It just wasn't for me. The next one that I read, because I kind of needed a palate cleanser and I wanted a lighter, sillier fantasy book, I read Magic Kingdom for Sale Sold by Terry Brooks, who is the author of the Shannara series. I think that's his most well-known work. But as the title suggests, this was about a lawyer who sees an ad for a Magic Kingdom for sale and decides to go for it. And this one, I'll go ahead and read the description. Landover was a genuine magic kingdom with fairy folk and wizardry, just as the advertisement had promised. But after he purchased it, Ben Halliday learned that there were a few details the ad had failed to mention. The kingdom was in ruin, the barons refused to recognize a king, and the peasants were without hope. A dragon was laying waste in the countryside, while an evil witch plotted to destroy everything. Ben's only follows were the incompetent court magician, Abernathy, the talking dog who served as a court scribe, and the lovely Willow, but she had a habit of putting down roots in the moonlight and turning into a tree. The paladin, legendary champion of the kings of Landover, seemed to be only a myth and an empty suit of armor. To put the final touch on the whole affair, Ben soon learned that the Iron Mark, terrible lord of the demons, had challenged all prospective kings of Landover to a duel to the death, a duel which no human could ever hope to win. The task of proving his right to be king seemed hopeless, but Ben Holiday was stubborn. I really enjoyed reading this book. It was the perfect blend of kind of a classic high fantasy with some really goofy elements to it. And I am planning on reading more of this series. The series has 6 books, so it didn't seem too overwhelming. But if you want to kind of read this as a standalone, it definitely works that way as well. You won't feel like you're missing out by not reading subsequent books, at least after finishing only the first one. The next 2 books that I read were a duology, and these were both middle grade books, so I read them at work, so I don't have the physical copies with me. But the first one was The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. And the second one is The War I Finally Won, and it continues the story. This book was really emotional, very sad, but really well written and really immersive in the countryside of England during World War II. And I'll go ahead and read the description. 10-year-old Ada has never left her one-room apartment. Her mother is too humiliated by Ada's twisted foot to let her outside. So when her little brother Jamie is shipped out of London to escape the war, Ada doesn't waste a minute. She sneaks out to join him. So begins a new adventure for Ada and for Susan Smith, the woman who is forced to take the 2 kids in. As Ada teaches herself to ride a pony, learns to read, and watches for German spies, she begins to trust Susan, and Susan begins to love Ada and Jamie. But in the end, will their bond be enough to hold them together through wartime, or will Ada and her brother fall back into the cruel hands of their mother? This was also a really emotional historical fiction book. It is very sad, so I would kind of give that warning before handing it off to a kid to read. But it was fantastically written and included so many small details of what life was like during that time, including really explaining really well how rationing worked, which I had not seen that specifically in a children's book before. But it gave a very unique perspective on World War II. There's a lot of children's historical fiction books that take place during World War II. This one felt different enough that I would recommend it to a kid who is interested in that time period. And then, as I said before, the next book that I read was The War I Finally Won by the same author, and that continues Ada and Jamie's story. The next book was also a continuation. I finished The Voyage of the Basilisk, which is the 3rd book in the Lady Trent series. I listened to this as an audiobook from Libby as well. In order to avoid spoilers, this continues Lady Trent's voyages, this time on the high seas. So it very much had the feel of a overseas travel, because she spends most of the time on a boat, but has some interesting discoveries on some smaller nations that she visits, including some islands. So still highly recommend the series if you're interested in a really long haul series about lots of details about dragons. There are 5 books total in the series. I did kind of take a break from them just because they are kind of slower paced books, and read some other stuff. Here is where I started my spring break reading. And during that break, I wanted to focus at least partially on some books that took place in Wisconsin, since I was doing a Wisconsin vacation. So the first one I read, I actually purchased a while ago. It was The Funeral Ladies of Ellery County by Claire Swinarski. I really like this author. I started reading her Catholic nonfiction first. She wrote Girl Arise, which is a kind of taking of knowledge from her podcast, which was the Catholic Feminist Podcast. She has she has written several really fantastic middle grade books that deal with some really hard-hitting topics, and this was her first novel for adults. I loved this book so much. I'll go ahead and read the synopsis first and then talk a little bit more about it. Esther Larson has been cooking for funerals in the Northwoods of Wisconsin for 70 years. Known locally as the Funeral Ladies, she and her cohort have worked hard to keep the mourners of Ellery County fed. It is her firm belief that there is very little a warm casserole and a piece of cherry pie can't help. But after falling for an internet scam that puts her home at risk, the proud Larson family matriarch is the one in need of assistance these days. Iris, Esther's whip-smart Gen Z granddaughter, would do anything for her family and her community. As she watches her friends move out of their lakeside town onto bigger and better things, Iris wonders why she feels so left behind in the place that she is desperate to make her home. But when Cooper Welsh shows up, she finally starts to feel like she's found the missing piece of her puzzle. Cooper is dealing with becoming a legal guardian to his younger half-sister after his beloved stepmother dies. While their celebrity chef father is focused on his booming career and top-ranked television show, Cooper is still hurting from a public tragedy he witnessed last year as a paramedic and finding it hard to cope. With Iris in the gorgeous Ellery County, he hopes he might finally find the home he is looking for. It doesn't seem like a community cookbook could possibly solve their problems, especially one where casseroles have their own section and cream of chicken soup mix is the most frequently used ingredient. But when you blend the can-do spirit of Midwestern grandmothers with the stubborn hope of a boy raised by food, plus a dash of long-awaited forgiveness, things just might turn out okay. I loved the characters in this story so much. It felt very cozy, very small town, but still dealt with some big emotional issues. And I, in the past, have never been drawn to this type of fiction that's realistic, emotional side of romance. But this book was absolutely beautiful. I am very much going to be recommending it to everyone I know, especially people who live or vacation in Wisconsin. But this was a fantastic book. It deserves a lot more credit than it's currently getting, so I highly, highly, highly recommend this one. The next one I read was by an author that I have read before, Amy E. Reichert. I read her book, The Coincidence of Coconut Cake, sometime last year and loved it because it took place so much in the Milwaukee area. So I decided to read Luck, Love, and Lemon Pie this time, and I'll read the synopsis. When Milwaukee area wife and mother MJ Boudreau notices her husband Chris seems more interested in the casino than in spending time with her, she is more bothered by her own indifference than by her husband's absence. So she picks up poker as a way for them to spend more time together and recapture some of the fun of their early relationship. Although the game doesn't give her the quality time with Chris that she'd hoped for, MJ finds that she has an uncanny knack for it. Increasing unhappy at home and intoxicated with her newfound freedom, MJ escapes to the Felts for comfort. After a string of great wins, she finds herself in Vegas, attracting the attention of a certain magnetic poker star. But when she's forced to choose between her precious family and an exhilarating new lifestyle, the stakes might be higher than she thought. MJ will have to play her hand carefully or risk losing it all. Just like The Coincidence of Coconut Cake, I loved how realistic the characters felt. You definitely get drawn into their lives and their personal issues. The only thing that I wasn't crazy about in this one is it does kind of show the characters towing the line of what is cheating and what is not cheating. And that's not something that I am personally a fan of. This book also very much felt like the type of story where it totally could have been solved by everybody actually communicating with each other, which kind of drives me nuts when that's the only roadblock in a storyline. But it was very well written. You do end up feeling very empathetic for the main character and what she's going through and how she's feeling and kind of just trying to figure some stuff out. I do still recommend it. I think it was good. It was well written. If you're looking into this one, hoping for more of the Milwaukee area feel of The Coincidence of Coconut Cake, this one didn't do that quite as much because a lot of the book also takes place in Vegas and it doesn't quite have as many Milwaukee landmarks featured in it, but it was still very good. There are 2 other books by this author that I currently own, and I do plan on reading them, and I'm excited to read them. I do like that they're all standalone books, but I would say if you want a book with the same vibe, I would read The Coincidence of Coconut Cake over this one, but it was still very well written. The next book I read, because I had to do it, and I did read this while I was on vacation, as an audiobook, was Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is the latest Hunger Games book, and it covers Haymitch's games. I am not super worried about spoilers for this one. It's been out now for a couple weeks, and of course people grabbed it up and read it. I will say I won't do any spoilers for this book, but if you haven't read the original Hunger Games trilogy, you might want to skip ahead a few minutes. And I'm not going to read the synopsis for this either because everybody knows what it's about. But this book follows Haymitch's Games, who was the mentor to Katniss and Peeta in the original Hunger Games trilogy. And I liked the setting of this book a lot, and I had the same feeling about the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, is that I feel like I'm just getting more pieces of this world and how history has progressed. Because between the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and this book, Sunrise on the Reaping, about 40 years have passed. And you can really see the technological developments, all the changes that have been made, kind of the increase of influence from the capital. And even though you know how this book ends, because we know where Haymitch ends up in the trilogy, there are enough twists and turns and things that are different and things that you don't expect that it feels very satisfying to read as someone who's been a fan of the series for a long time. So obviously I know that it blew up. It was very, very popular and people are going to read it anyway, but I do highly recommend it. I'm going to pause for 1 second because I'm about to lose my battery. Okay, we're back with a little bit more battery so we can continue. The next book I read was one that was purchased at the gift shop at the Our Lady of Champion Shrine in Champion, Wisconsin. And my mom actually bought this, but we did stop there when we went up to Door County as well. And this is a historical fiction novel about the time frame where the apparition happened, or actually just after the apparition. If you don't know about the Our Lady of Champion story, Mary appeared to a woman named Adele in the woods, and they built a chapel and a church around it. And this story follows a young woman named Slaney who was living around the same time period and learned from Adele. Reading off the back, it says, set within the expanses of the American frontier, this story follows Slaney, an inquisitive pioneer girl whose life is forever transformed when a mysterious seer shows up at her door. Amidst the backdrop of the Civil War, a family tragedy, and the nation's most destructive wildfire, Slaney must navigate her rugged pioneer life as she encounters love and loss and comes face to face with the story of America's first approved Marian apparition. This one's labeled as a YA book, and I would agree with that, and it's one that I'm considering purchasing for our school library because I think some of my 7th and 8th graders might enjoy reading this. It was a really good book. It really pulls you into the time frame and sets the story against enough kind of well-known historical landmarks that it's easy to understand kind of what was going on in the country at that time. But highly recommend this book and visiting Our Lady of Champion as well. The last book that I read for the month, I read as an ebook from Libby, and it was Only If You're Lucky by Stacey Willingham. And this was kind of a very cryptic thriller. It takes place in a college town, follows a group of friends who are all roommates, and the description was kind of what drew me in because it's very, very short, but it just says, 6 months ago we moved in together, Lucy, Nicole, Sloan, and me. Lucy pulled us into her orbit and showed us what college life could be. Now Lucy is missing and a boy from the house next door is dead. The police are asking questions, but we won't break. We'll keep her secrets and ours. This was a very well-written thriller. I liked kind of the college town aspect of it. The only things that I wasn't crazy about are that it definitely follows like the partying lifestyle in college, including some not so great decisions, but all thrillers kind of have to include somebody making not so great decisions. So it fits well with the genre. It wasn't anything unexpected for that genre, but just kind of keep that in mind if you're planning on reading it. It does include a lot of substance use, both alcohol and other things, but it had a lot of really good twists and turns to where I was completely surprised by the ending. I could not have predicted what happened, and it still made sense. So I do recommend it. as much as I recommend any thriller, they're quick reads for a reason. So if you're looking for something to keep you occupied on a plane or a train, it's a good choice. Those were all the books that I read for this month. I did want to kind of highlight some of the books that I purchased while I was in Door County, starting with ones that I got at the Our Lady of Champion Shrine. I'm about to lose battery again. Hold on. Okay, hopefully this time we can actually continue filming and not have to stop for camera batteries. That's the one thing I don't like about the camera I currently have. There's no battery you can remove and put back in. So we're just kind of working with it right now. The first book I purchased at Our Lady of Champion was God's Influencer, which is about Carlo Acutis. He will be canonized on April 27th. I got this one partially because I was curious, but also because it's one that I would like to add to my school library, since he's a young saint and patron saint of technology. So my students are very interested in his life. The second book that I purchased also from Our Lady of Champion was The Lighthouse, which is a novel. This one was on the clearance rack, which is part of why I grabbed it. But the synopsis says, Ethan McQuarrie is a young lighthouse keeper on a tiny island, the rugged outcropping of easternmost Cape Breton Island on the Atlantic Ocean. A man without any family, he sees himself as a silent vigilant, performing his duties courageously year after year with an admirable sense of responsibility. He cherishes his solitude and is grateful that his interactions with human beings are rare. Even so, he is haunted by his aloneness in the world and by a feeling that his life is meaningless. His courage, his integrity, his love of the sea and wildlife, of practical skills, and of learning are in the end not enough. He is faced with some internal storms and sometimes literal storms of terrifying power. From time to time, he becomes aware that messengers are sent to him from what he calls the awakeness in existence, the listeningness, but he can not at first recognize them as messengers or understand what they might be telling him, until he finds himself caught up in catastrophic events and begins to see the mysterious undercurrents of reality and the hidden face of love. So I've been reading quite a few Catholic fiction books lately, and I thought this would be a good one to add to my collection, which is why I picked it up. The last one that I got from Our Lady of Champion just made me laugh. It's called The Weird Catholic Handbook. On the back it just says, A Journey Through the Strange and Sacred. But I love leather-bound books, or books that look like leather-bound books in this case. And of course it had a skull on it, so I had to get it. So I'm excited to read this one. This seems kind of like almost like the Random Book of Knowledge type books. Each chapter has a very different title. Just to take a look at some of the things on the table of contents, we have Christian werewolves, ? We have Saint Columba and the Loch Ness Monster. We have the Incorruptibles. We have Catacomb Saints, Catholic ghost stories, Levitation, When Saints Fly, and lots of other random things in there. So I'm excited to read that one. The next set of books that I got came from other stores. So the first one I got was Haunted in Door County, and I picked this up from a restaurant in Sister Bay. I love spooky stories, so had to pick this one up. The next one I got doesn't really have anything to do with Door County or Wisconsin, but I stopped at the Novel Bay bookstore in Sturgeon Bay, I think is where it was. Got The Science Behind Middle Earth. I already have The Science of Harry Potter, The Physics of Christmas, and The Physics of Star Trek, which I think are all by different authors, but when I saw this one, I knew I had to add it to the collection. And the next two that I got are two books in a series. I'm trying to remember which one comes first. I think this one comes first. But it's A Death in Door County and Death in the Dark Woods, and these are both cryptid mysteries by a local Door County author. So I'm excited to read all of those. And that's going to be it for this podcast. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you would like to follow me on other social media sites, that information will be in the description box below. And if you'd like to follow me right here on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button for all of my book-related and crafty stuff right here. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.